Good afternoon. Well, it's rare that I post my podcast in the afternoon by Japan Standard Time. It's in the middle of the night in the East Coast, but actually it's in the morning in Israel. And today's guest is a renowned international lawyer and GOP Chairman overseas, Marc Zell Esq. It's very grateful that he's coming. He came to my podcast, and we could discuss various topics. He was very open to discuss with his own views, opinions, which I really, really appreciate. And first of all, I started this podcast after October 7th. I spoke about the reasons, and well, the reasons why I am speaking out about Israel or Israeli people or the Jewish people are because of October 7th, and I was thinking of Jewish people the whole time because I have had friends. I have had a grandfather-like person who was Jewish. He used to be a famous medical professor from Pennsylvania State University. Jewish people, to me, it's not just people, but they have been a part of my life in various moments. And not just that, I have to say Israeli people and Israel. It was very, very hard to describe how I felt. It took so long to describe how I felt personally about October 7th, but because it was very, very difficult for me. It was even difficult for me to say it was difficult because I was very shocked. And I started, that was the day, however, I decided to never to stop talking about Israel, Israeli people, Jewish people, October 7th. And I have known about the terrorist attacks, the brutal terrorist attacks by the Palestinian terrorists for a very long time. I'm not saying that these are ordinary Palestinian people. However, when it comes to peace, I'm not saying that, okay, please do not take this podcast this way. I'm not promoting Israel as to occupy the territory. I'm not talking about that. Please think of the peace for the people. And please consider the fact that 2 million Arab population is living peacefully with full rights in Israel. I mean, Israel is not an apartheid state or just occupying in the first place. But please do think of the sovereignty of Israel. And at the same time, what level of national security Israel is and why, how October 7th happened. I mean, a lot of those people who discuss pro-Hamas narratives. They do not even know what October 7th was. They even deny what happened. They need to see the facts. They need to face the facts. What happened on that day? It's not a problem for me, okay? Those people were brutally murdered, the victims. And there are 55 hostages now, alive or deceased. So, and I have to mention this. I discussed with Leonard Grantstein over Mr. Yaron Lischinski, Miss Sarah Milgram, who were brutally murdered. They were Israeli embassy staffs. That day, that incident, that moment crossed the line too. Anti-Semitism can never be tolerated. At the same time, we have to know the history of the Jewish homeland and where the term Jew is from, which is Judea, right? And at the same time, we have to honor the territorial integrity of Israel. I mean, it's a nation. And Mark is an expert on international law. So today he is going to discuss Israel from various perspectives. And also I had some personal questions about the transition period and what was happening after October 7th. And I had very clear answers. Well, I had very clear answers, and please listen to our conversation. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning, Hannah.
How are you?
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. It's early in the morning.
Great.
So,
Well, yeah, it is a bit early, but so I've been up for a couple hours.
okay. Wow. Yeah, I feel very grateful that I could invite you to my podcast, really. And thank you very much. So,
Okay, it's glad to be. I guess your listeners know who I am
yes,
from your
sure.
from your. Okay,
Yes.
fantastic.
So, of course, you are an international lawyer, and you are a GOP chairman overseas. So, yeah. Um, so, if you could, do you mind possibly share like your family background? Maybe a little, if you could.
Well, sure. I was born in 1953 in Washington, D.C. in the United States. My parents. My mother came to the United States as a child from Cuba. Her parents came from Poland during the 1920s to escape the anti-Semitism that was growing in that country at the time. And my father was born in the United States in Western Pennsylvania. His parents came over from what was then Hungary before World War One to escape the anti-Semitism that was prevailing in that country at the time. And I am one of four children, one of whom sadly has my youngest sister, passed away some time ago. And I married my beautiful wife, Robin, in 1975 after graduating from I graduated from Princeton University and was in law school. And we eventually had six children in the United States and another two here in Israel after we emigrated to Israel in 1986. And now we're the proud grandparents of some 22 grandchildren, 11 boys and 11 girls, and two others are expected to join us in October. So that, with God's help, will bring us to 24 grandchildren.
Wow.
As I said, I'm a graduate of Princeton University, where I studied linguistics and went to the University of Maryland School of Law, finished the top of my class, and have been practicing law since 1977. And international law has really been my focus for the past almost 40, more than 40 years, really. So is that a good introduction, Hannah, into for your listeners? And I
Sure.
can give more if you need.
Sure, of course. I mean, yes, thank you very much, Actually, I have an Irish friend who has 12 siblings. So I guess
That's
you are, yes.
I'm not up to that yet. But I don't think I'm going to get there, but we've
Yes.
done our bit. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, well, I would like to get into some, the topics because I have a lot of questions for you. Uh,
sure.
and well, first of all, October 7th, that was horrific. That was horrible to me. And that changed my view on, you know, the defense itself, of basically not just, Israel, because this is about, I think, the defense of the nation, itself, like how, because Israel has a very strong, a defense, and it happened. I mean, I do not want to blame who or whatever, because I mean, that was just truly sad. And that was the day I just decided to never to stop saying that, I care about Israel. Because it just changed my life really entirely. And, that was for the people I know, and that was for the Jewish people, and that was the day I just felt that it does not matter what I was told in public because, what I care matters really. I just felt that way. And so, and, um, um, well, first of all, that was very shocking. But what was shocking was what happened after that. But I was expecting that at some point because of the anti-Semitism in the past, as you mentioned. But what is happening in the United States and Europe right now is just too sickening. And there was a presidential election in 2024, and I was actually expecting President Trump to be elected, to be honest. But for I mean, it's not there's nothing conspiracy or anything, but I just thought that he would win. And I was not sure because there has had been, I have to say, so many speculations, rumors on what was even happening during the military, campaign, when the military campaign started in Gaza. And um, there, in a minute, there were people, calling for like ceasefire, but it was not for the ceasefire or anything because there are hostages even now, and I just have to say that, I was not satisfied with the prior administration's reaction to what was happening. And I mean, if you could you explain what was really happening, during the transition time, after the election and January, like those 2 months, I have to say.
Yeah, well, first, you made a very comprehensive description of what's happened since on October 7th and since then. And let me just say, uh, any thinking or feeling human being that was exposed to the realities of October 7th, which I began to hear about immediately as they were happening, really at 6:29 in the morning on October 7th. And my phone just started exploding with all of these alerts about missile attacks and artillery attacks from Gaza, and I realized that something very, very sinister, very serious was ongoing. And uh, as the hours passed, it became very clear the extent of what Hamas and the Islamic Jihad had achieved in terms of crossing the border and slaughtering almost 1,200 Israelis. Most of them were Israeli citizens, and raping and burning uh, women and children and men, and inexplicable, indescribable horror. But you're right also, Hannah, in pointing out that as great and as horrific as the events of October 7th were, the reaction of the world immediately after and even as those events were still ongoing was was incomprehensible. It was just shocking that to see thousands of people, young people, university students in the United States and Europe. I don't know what was happening in Japan, but really taking the side of Hamas after they perpetrated one of the most horrible attacks on Jews since the Holocaust. I mean, that totally blew me away. I had no, as much as I'm aware of the anti-Semitic currents that are flowing in the West and the world at large, certainly in the Arab and the Muslim world, I never ever believed that that would happen after October 7th, but it did. And it's important for your listeners to realize, Anna, that for 3 weeks after October 7th, and I know this because my son was a tank commander at that time, and we were watching very carefully what our army was doing. For 3 weeks, the Israeli army did not set a foot into Gaza. Okay. And they were being pressured by the Biden administration. Now after recent revelations, we're not exactly sure if this was Biden's policy or that of his progressive left-wing advisors and former President Obama. But in any case, the Biden administration was consistently urging Israel not to launch any ground operations into Gaza for 3 weeks. And still, this wave of anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protests continued to grow and grow all over the world, the so-called free world. And it was only on October 28th, literally 3 weeks after October 7th, that the Israeli army, including my son and his comrades, uh, entered Gaza and began the ground war, which is still being fought today and hopefully will be finished with a victory in not too distant future. So that is one of the things that happened. Now, during the fighting that's been going on for more than a year and a half in Gaza, up till January 20th, 2025, the Biden administration, which was in power at that time, tried consistently to prevent Israel from winning the war, and they did this by two things. First, they insisted on Israel providing huge quantities of humanitarian assistance to the population in Gaza. At the same time, they knew that virtually all of it was being stolen by Hamas and kept, most of it kept for Hamas in order to feed its own fighters against Israel. And what they had left over, they resold to the Gazan population at double and triple the price of the food, just making huge profits, again, to finance their terror operation and their war against Israel. And the other thing that the Biden administration was to put a stop hold on the sale and delivery of needed munitions and equipment to Israel, particularly munitions that that our tank commanders, like my son, needed to fight the war, and our pilots needed to conduct the air assaults on the terrorist positions in Gaza, and even the D9 bulldozers, which were needed to clear the area and to expose the huge underground tunnel systems, almost 500 kilometers of underground tunnels, larger than the London Underground. This was this too was delayed by the Biden administration, all in an attempt to prevent Israel from winning the war. And a third thing that the Biden administration did is they threw statements, not only primarily from then Vice President Kamala Harris and later presidential candidate Kamala Harris, demanding that Israel not enter into those areas in Gaza, which it had yet to attack at that point during the Gazan war, and particularly Rafah and Khan Yunis. And it turns out, in retrospect, that these are the areas where the Hamas leadership was cowardly hiding and holding many of the hostages. In recent days, we've been able to recover, sadly, only the bodies of several hostages that were being kept in those areas. And our army continues to work, as well as our prime minister and the official that's in charge of the hostage matters, General Gal Hirsch, who I've had the honor of meeting and knowing and really respect. They've been working literally 24 hours a day to free the remaining hostages, dead and alive, and also to help those families of the hostages who are still being held, and those have been released since October 7th. 251 hostages. So your listeners will recall were taken by Hamas on October 7th, including dead bodies, and many others died during captivity due to the Hamas tortures
They executed the
and
hostages.
and executed. That's right. We had the six hostages, including Hirsch Goldenberg, I think it was his last name,
Oh, yeah.
Poland Goldenberg, who was he and
Terrible.
his five comrades were just shot in the head, mafia style, by Hamas as they were about to be released. So, so this is what we've been dealing with, Hannah, and I can tell you that I don't think any nation faced with this kind of enemy, and
Mm.
of course we're fighting it on 7 different fronts at
Yeah.
the same time. No nation, including your own, would ever permit this to happen to its citizens without a forceful and decisive response. And that's what we're doing. We'll continue to do.
Yes, I I could not help thinking of Japan, at the same time. And it's shocking, but for various reasons, like, Japan is facing the threat of communist China, obviously, and North Korea is the puppet of the Chinese administration.
Right.
And they're firing missiles all over. And when 2022 started, what I thought was that Putin might give the missile technology to North Korea, because that was something that might happen. And if that would ever happen, as Japan would be seriously in problem. And
Sure.
so, I mean, now the Japanese media are shockingly releasing, well, like the footages and also comments made by Al Jazeera every day. That's what NHK, the state-sponsored media, is doing. And
Yeah, no, I understand. And I've done interviews for the NHK, and their reporters in Israel have been fair, at least in terms of the interviews. But the editorial policies, I gather from what you said, are in line with a lot of the very left-wing media around the Western world. So it's uh, it's a shame that the people in the world are not getting the full picture and are being really bombarded with all this Qatari and Iranian propaganda, which is intended to skew the public debate against Israel in a way that just doesn't make any sense. It's really kind of insanity, quite honestly. But it's a war, and they're using every tool that they can, including psychological tools, to sway international opinion against the world's only Jewish state, which is a lot smaller than Japan and has a population that's probably less than a tenth of that of Japan.
yes, I really did not have words on October 7th. And at the same time, I have actually I have met with a woman, who survived Nova Music Festival, and it's very, very shocking. And sometimes I really feel, as you say, the insanity of the media. And what is shocking is some of the anti-Semitic comments that I see on in Japanese, really, even on social
You know, I
media.
wonder if you're here's I just have a question for you and your viewers. You know, one of the things that has always struck me as I talk to people from all over the world is their misperceptions of the size and strength of the Jewish people. Japan has a population of just under 100 million, if I'm not mistaken, and there are people around the world that believe that that's basically the size of the Jewish population on the planet. I wonder if your reviewers or listeners would be shocked to learn that in the entire world, the entire Earth, there are approximately 14 million Jews, and in the state of most of them who live in the state of Israel, about 7 million in the state of Israel. But that's it. And when I talked to a professor from Nigeria not long ago in London, and I asked him, how many Jews do you think there are on the planet, given the kind of
Mm.
attention that Israel and the Jewish people get in the media? And he said, well, at least 70 million. Okay. And so we're just a tiny fraction of the world's population. We get a disproportionate share of the attention in the world, and in a situation where we are, as what happened on October 7th, and before October 7th. Okay. I
Exactly.
have two other sons,
Mm.
okay, who were fighting the Hamas in Gaza since 2006 when they came to power. And and that was because the Hamas consistently opened massive rocket attacks against civilian targets in Israel without any provocation, and also kidnap people, our soldiers and individual and civilians, much smaller numbers than on October 7th, but learned from all that experience that in the end of the day, the world would force Israel to back off and not to finish the job, and turn a blind eye to the atrocities that Hamas was then committing. Of course,
Mm.
October 7th just dwarfed everything else that was going on beforehand. And then what you hear also, I just heard a woman from Canada, a Palestinian woman in Canada, complaining on a tweet that that what happened on October 7th was fully justified because of 75 years, as she put it, of horror committed against Palestinian people in Gaza.
Well, that's
Well,
not
that's a
true.
simple lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. In fact, for almost 20 years of those 75 or 70 7 years, okay, that the state of Israel has existed, Gaza was under Egyptian control, and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, where I live, was under Jordanian control. That it wasn't under Israeli control at all. And those areas were used throughout the time of Egyptian and Jordanian occupation as launching grounds, launching sites for terror attacks against the state of Israel as it existed before 1967. And then when the Six-Day War came in 67, where the Egyptian president and the Jordanian king and others united to wipe Israel off the face of the map, on the face of the earth, and Israel responded in a war of self-defense and threw the Egyptians out of Sinai and the Jordanians out of Judea and Samaria and the Syrians off the Golan Heights. When we did that, then all of a sudden the world decided that Israel is the aggressor and that we are violating the rights of the Palestinian people. You know that throughout the time that Jordan and Egypt controlled both Gaza and the Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, no attempts were made to establish a Palestinian state in those areas that were under Arab control. Okay, to the contrary, they suppressed Palestinian Arab efforts at independence. Okay, nobody said a word about it at that time. In fact, when Israel came in '67, and particularly in Judea and Samaria, where there was a large Palestinian population in Gaza, Israel permitted the opening for the first time of Arab universities, electrified Arab villages and towns, created sanitation systems and so on for the Palestinian Arab population for the first time, where they were kept in abominable conditions by their Arab occupiers before '67, and that's, I'm not suggesting that Israel is perfect, but it has a very, very commendable and laudable policy towards raising the standard of living and treating all people, Arabs and Jews, Christians and Muslims and Druze and others, fairly. That's why Israel is the only state in the Middle East today that is a true democracy that protects the minority rights of religious minorities and ethnic minorities, and protects the rights of persons of different sexual orientations, homosexuals and lesbians and so on. Whereas even in the very countries that these groups, the transgenders and the gays and lesbians, are supporting in the Western world at this time, in Palestinian territories, those people are thrown off rooftops and tortured and executed because of their sexual preferences. Not in Israel. Okay. In fact, we just had a gay parade, Pride Day parade in Jerusalem, and this Friday there's another one in Tel Aviv. Okay. I'm not saying where I stand on all that, but it is the law in Israel. They are protected, and from that standpoint, I'm proud that Israel stands alone in the entire region in protecting the rights of all people, of all religions and all orientations and all ethnicities to live in peace together. In fact, another thing, Israel is regularly accused of genocide in Gaza. I mean, there's an actual International Court of Justice proceeding against us, and the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants against our current standing prime minister and former defense minister because of Gaza. Genocidal, alleged genocidal conduct in Gaza. But in fact, when you look at how Israel treated its Arab population that remained inside Israel after 1948, there are approximately 200,000 Arabs who stayed in Israel. The rest of them fled at the behest of the Arab leadership at that time, thinking that Israel would be destroyed during the War of Independence. But 200,000 did remain in the Galilee and the Negev and Jaffa and Haifa and some other places. And today, that population now numbers in excess of 2 million. In other words, has increased 10 times over this people in Israel over this period of time. And Israel is being accused of genocide, a word that was coined because of the actual genocide of the Jewish people in Israel during the Holocaust. So, I mean, it's a world that has turned on its head, Hannah. Complete absurdity, complete insanity. The only solace I take as a religious Jew from these events is, according to our Talmud, our Gemara, which I understand is of great interest in Japan and South Korea, for example, is that we say that during the time that the Messiah, when he comes to Israel, comes to the world, this is what's going to happen the world over. Utter chaos, confusion. Everything will be turned on its head. All logic will be inverted, and the world will become a topsy-turvy chaos. And that's what's happening now. Maybe, if this is God's plan, this is a sign that maybe we're on the brink of a new age, a messianic age, which is something I hope indeed happens.
Yes, I actually was thinking of the same thing, before, the podcast interview and before you brought up the topic. And um yes, I was when, I post every time I posted about Israel, there were comments about like Golan Heights illegal occupation, like all these things. Okay. They do these people who and I was like first before October 7th, I did not I have room to argue with them. So I just decided to ignore, but at the same time, I did not care about I did not want to argue with them at the same time. But after October 7th, it really does not matter to me anymore. And I mean, it's a matter of human rights. And at the same time, they do not understand what Israel is. I mean, to me, Israel has been very interesting as a nation, not just, as a Jewish state, because it's a very, very democratic nation to me. It's a very different background from Japan. And Japan used to be a monarchy, so it's different. So to me, it sounded, that to me, it still sounds that people are very fairly like treated, compared to, well, I would have to say that Israel is a very, very democratic country to me. And
Well, I want to just, if I can interrupt you for a second, Hannah,
sure.
I want to say a word of thanks to the Japanese people on a personal level, because um,
Oh, please.
as you know, during the World War II, Japan was allied with Nazi Germany and Italy and so on. But what they did do is they saved hundreds, maybe even thousands of Jews who were fleeing the Nazi Holocaust, including my uncle and two of his brothers, who came from Poland and were saved by the Japanese consul in Vilna, Sugihiro. And as a result, they were able to have refuge in Japan until 1942, 1943, where they were then expelled to go to Shanghai, which was also under Japanese occupation at the time. But at least they were allowed to survive. And after the war, they made their way to various places, to India, to Israel, to the United States, uh, and that is because of the Japanese nation and its diplomatic service. I just want to say thank you. I mean, that's something that's deeply personal to me, and whatever happened during World War II, which was horrible, um, and under an undemocratic Japanese regime. Japan has learned from that experience and has become a democratic state, and so which has been a friend of Israel for some time. In fact, Israel, one of Israel's ambassadors to Japan, Eli Cohen, was the karate champion, was a is a very good friend of mine and has high regard for the Japanese people. So That's something I would like to say. And then in terms of Israel, yes, we are a democracy. Now, we're like most democracies, we're not perfect. We do the best we can for all of our citizens, Arab and Jew alike, Christian, Muslim, and Jew alike. But it's not an accident that the only place in the Middle East where the Christian population has increased, the only place is Israel. Okay, and the Palestine take a place. I live in Judea near Bethlehem, just across, just on the other side of the hill from Bethlehem.
Oh,
Bethlehem before 1967 had a population that was about 80% Christian. Okay, it was the birthplace of Jesus and so on. Uh, Now, since the since the Palestinian Authority has taken over and it's become a Palestinian territory, Bethlehem, just right across the street from me, practically, the Christian population of Bethlehem has dwindled to less than 10%. Okay, and that's the reason because they are oppressed. The Muslim authorities are doing whatever they can to persecute Christians, non-Muslims that live in the areas. Imagine what they would do to the Jews that would, in these areas if they ever got, God forbid, any kind of control over us. But that's one of the reasons, Hannah, that I and many others in Israel support the annexation of Judea and Samaria, and frankly, Gaza as well. We have to make sure that the war there ends, so that Israel will have full legal authority over Judea and Samaria, not just West Bank, not just as an occupier, but as a legitimate sovereign, which is exactly what the United Nations, or beforehand, the League of Nations, promised would be the case. That Israel would, that they called it Palestine at that time, the land of Israel in Hebrew, would become the homeland, the national home of the Jewish people, not just in Tel Aviv or in Haifa or so, but all throughout the land of Israel up to the Jordan River. Okay, and the League of Nations mandate, which was adopted in 1922 and was given to the United Kingdom, Britain, in order to create a Jewish national home, was specific in that it applied throughout Israel, then Palestine, up to and including Judea and Samaria and Gaza, all of Jerusalem. That was the plan. That's what Japan signed up to when it was a member of the League of Nations before it withdrew. That's what the United States signed up to. And of course, Britain took the mandate with that specific provision in the actual League of Nations mandate. And after the League of Nations disappeared or dissolved before World War II and was replaced by the United Nations in 1944-45, Article 80 of the United Nations Charter simply said that the new United Nations Trusteeship Council would then take over the responsibilities of the former League of Nations with regard to mandated territories, including Judea and Samaria and Gaza. Okay, so those areas under international law, okay, under the terms of the League of Nations mandate, as it was, which adopted the San Remo agreements from 1920, all of that, which was approved by the international community throughout that period. Those documents support the claim of the Jewish people to establish their national home in all of the land of Israel, including Judea and Samaria and Gaza. And that's where I stand. And President Trump has been asked to recognize Jewish Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, and he is considering that. Whether he does it or not is another story, because there are other factors that will influence his decision. But the mere fact that he's willing to consider that, and that his ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, supports that idea, I think shows that the time has come for the world to recognize that the Jewish people, the small, tiny Jewish people in the small sliver of land, has the right to sovereignty throughout that land. Of course, to respect the civil rights of the other non-Jewish peoples that live in the land. We believe that. We've proven that we can do that, as I've mentioned, in the state of Israel itself, where Arabs are not only increased, but participate fully in all of the professions, sitting on our Supreme Court and our diplomatic corps, um, you know, have opportunities to attend universities on par with the Jewish population. They have really prospered under Israeli rule. And not to say we can't do better. We will continually try to do better for Jewish and Arab citizens alike. But nevertheless, Israel has shown that when it comes to being fair to non-Jews under its control, we we bear that responsibility fully, and we have been successful. And I think the key to peace within the land of Israel, at least, is for Israel to extend that authority throughout the former mandated territory, up to and including the Jordan River. You hear all these slogans that these protesters are challenging. They don't even know what they're talking about. They say, "Free Palestine from the river to the sea," right? And that's their big slogan.
That's
The river is the Jordan
like,
River. The sea is the Mediterranean.
yeah.
And what they're calling for, actually, what these people are wittingly or unwittingly calling for, is the destruction of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, because that's where they live, from the Jordan River to the sea. We say Israeli sovereignty should be extended from the river to the sea, and we say that with respect and giving respect to the civil rights of all non-Jewish populations within that area, the Palestinian Arabs and others that are living in that area. We respect that, and we've proven that we can provide them with protection in accordance with the rule of law.
Yes, and you mentioned actually, the Arab population, prospering in, uh, I have to say, well, Israel. See, not just, Arab population, but Jewish people from different cultural background, live together in peace.
Excellent point. And I want to this. I'm sorry to jump in,
Yeah,
but
please go.
I just can't help myself, Hannah. You're absolutely right. When the state of Israel was created, the entire population of the state of Israel at that time was around 600,000, most primarily Jews. 200,000 or even more Arabs were living there. Actually, almost an equal number of Arabs. 400,000 of them or more actually fled the country at the request of the Arab leadership, as I mentioned. But there were 800,000 Jews living in Arab countries, in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, in Morocco, and Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt. They were they were there. They were living in those countries, and all of them, with except for very very minuscule numbers, all of them fled or were expelled from those countries without anything more than the clothes on their backs. Okay, many of them, in fact, most of them came to Israel. Others came to the United States, to Europe, and so on. But most of them came to Israel. Never were compensated by these Arab states. Okay, and that was happening at the same time when roughly the same number of Arabs who were living in the land of Israel left Israel and went to those same countries. Many of them. So that's never talked about, Hannah. So I really take my hat off to you for mentioning this. There was a population swap that occurred between 1948 and 19 and to date, this day today. So where the Jews fled with their lives, many of them didn't. And many of them were massacred in these countries where they had been living literally for thousands of years. But they came to Israel, established themselves here in Israel. Kurdish Jews and Iraqi Jews and Iranian Jews and Moroccan Jews make up probably a majority of the population of the Jewish population here in Israel. And they have thrived and succeeded as well. They've just by being alive and saved from destruction in the countries where they had lived for centuries. Now they came to Israel, and with under conditions which were not easy in the beginning at all. Israel was a very tiny country with no resources, no real help from around the world. Managed to assimilate hundreds of thousands of Jews from Arab countries and from Muslim countries, and now they are a highly successful component of the population here in Israel. Make up maybe a majority, as I indicated. The population are determining our running in the Knesset, our parliament, and then the government and an army. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing story.
Yes.
And thanks to you, Hannah, we're mentioning it today. Thank you.
Well, actually, I know at least one Iraqi Jew woman. I know her son, and she makes beautiful silverware and puts that on Instagram. So yeah, I was going to ask you about yes, this British mandate of Palestine, the sovereignty of what Israel's the sovereignty should be. I think that's what you mentioned is actually probably, I hope that's, going to be the future of Israel. And, it's not for the sake of Israel, but it's for the sake of the peace for in the region. I really believe so. So, yeah, and
I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right about that. I think for the peace of the land of Israel itself, there's no question that Israeli sovereignty over all of it will protect Jews and Arabs alike. That's a proven fact. Okay. It's only when we've given the Palestinian Arabs, for example, the ability to rule themselves, like we did in Gaza since 2005, or in all the communities of the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, where the Palestinian Authority has exclusive jurisdiction, like in Jericho and Hebron and Shechem, Nablus, and so on, Jenin. That these areas have turned into hotbeds of terrorism and oppression, not only against Jews who don't live in those areas any longer, except in enclaves, but for Palestinian Arabs who want to live in peace with Israel and the Jewish people. Okay. And this brings me to the point of the Abraham Accords, which I think is a really important thing. This is one of the great achievements, foreign policy achievements of the Trump administration and during President Trump's first term in office from 2017 to 2021. And really historic. I mean, he was told at the beginning when he proposed this kind of a complete revolution and thinking about peace in the Middle East, he was told he was crazy. It'll never happen. But it did happen. It happened because of the courage of his commitments and the creativity of his thinking, and the willingness of Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government to agree to this framework. So we achieved peace, real peace, with Bahrain, with the United Arab Emirates, with Morocco. And I believe now that President Trump has returned to office since January 20th, I believe that serious progress will be made to expand the Abraham Accords. I can tell you that I know personally of interest of many Arab states who no longer uh, um, under control of despotic regimes are interested in joining the Abraham Accords, including Saudi Arabia, perhaps the most important of these Arab nations, and Egypt, of course, has a peace, albeit a cold peace, with Israel already, as does Jordan. So the idea of expanding the Abraham Accords to include most of the Muslim states in the region is a fantastic development, which will lead to real peace. I'm hopeful throughout the region, starting from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Persian Gulf. So let's hope that happens, and I believe that we have for that. Maybe we can talk a little bit in the time that remains, because I've got to go in about 10 minutes. But
okay.
maybe we can talk a little bit about Iran, which is
Yes.
I think a major problem.
Mhm.
So go ahead. I'll turn it back to you.
Uh, well, this nuclear enrichment, that's a problem. And the not, and I think I saw a post by Khamenei that, they are planning to attack the nuclear facility in Israel for some, and that's very much an aggressive act that Iran is
Yeah.
planning.
All right. So let's talk about that for a minute. First of all, to put things in context,
Mhm.
Iran, unlike Israel, has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has promised time and time again that it would not be developing nuclear weapons. Israel has shown by the capture of the Iranian archives a couple of years ago that the Iranians have been pursuing a nuclear program throughout this period, including after they signed the so-called nuclear arms deal with the Obama administration and the European countries in 2015. So, and based on that, the United States under Obama and under Biden gave billions of dollars to the Iranian government, which they subsequently used not only to develop their nuclear program, but to fund terror organizations and their proxies against Israel, including Hamas, throughout this time period. So the Iranians can't be trusted on this issue, and they have stated specifically that they will use nuclear weapons or whatever they have to destroy the state of Israel. They've promised it time and time again, promising the death of the little Satan they call Israel, and also the great Satan who they refer to the United States. For Israel, the Iranian threat of nuclear weaponization is an existential threat. With two or three nuclear bombs atop a properly constructed nuclear ballistic missile, which the Iranians have in spades, uh, just 2 to 3 bombs will put an end to the state of Israel as we know it. So there is no way that we can, as Israelis, permit that to happen. And it is no consolation that people tell us, including people in the United States like Tucker Carlson, they say to us, well, the Iranians don't really want to have a nuclear weapon, and it's just a lot of tough talk when they say they're going to destroy the Jewish state. It's not really going to happen. Well, we are the people of the Holocaust, and we heard the same things before 1939. Okay, and we saw what happened then. 6 million of our brothers and sisters, including about 200 members of my own family and my wife's, who were destroyed by the Nazis and their collaborators. So I have Israel understanding that, and the whole course of Jewish history, for that matter, cannot possibly believe that the Iranians, once they get nuclear weapons, will not do what they've been promising to do consistently since the Muslim Islamists took over the country in 1979. So we have to get rid of this threat.
Yes,
It
and
means
also, yes, I mean, Hamas, well, not Hamas, but Khamenei, often says Zionist state cannot be trusted, which means Israel. I mean, he's talking about
it's
Israel.
not the question to be trusted. Khamenei says Israel, the Zionist enemy, must be destroyed. It's not a question of trust. And what the Iranians are doing is they claim to have gotten some information about Israel's nuclear program. I don't know if that's true or not, but the information I have is it's a lot of baloney. But even if they have it, what do you mean that they haven't tried that they're going to attack Israel's nuclear facilities? They've tried to do that. It's not that that's not only that they've promised to do, they've actually tried to do that. And the Iranians themselves launched 2 major missile attacks and drone attacks, but primarily ballistic missile attacks against Israel in 2024 and 25. Okay. And they aimed at Israeli nuclear facilities.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. In the Negev and on the coast. They aimed to destroy them. They failed, but they tried to do that. It's not that they're threatening to do it if we attack them. We must attack them, and we must destroy their nuclear facilities, in my view. We must do it quickly before the window of opportunity that was created by our response to those earlier Iranian missile attacks expires and closes. And we must not be be afraid of the Iranian response, which will come. But
Well,
we will deal with it.
yes, and I I believe and hope that President Trump, do you believe, do you consider that for for the sake of Israel and for the interests of Israel, President Trump is going to support the airstrikes against?
Okay. So let me address that question. It's an excellent question. President Trump President Trump's cardinal principle in foreign policy is America first. The corollary to that is that every nation, every sovereign nation, must put its own interests first
Yeah.
when conducting its foreign policy, and that's correct. Borders matter, sovereignty matters, national interests matter, and that's President Trump's view of the world, and I fully agree with that. I think that's entirely appropriate. It's not a globalist point of view. It's a nationalist, a modern nationalist point of view, which is, I think, healthy and correct. Now, what are America's interests and what are Israel's interests? As I've indicated, Israel's interest is to survive, okay, and to survive in the face of a Iranian nuclear attack, which could destroy our country with 2 or 3 bombs. America's interest is different, okay? Japan's interest is different, okay? Iran does not pose an existential threat to Japan or to the United States. So when President Trump looks at this problem from an America first perspective, he says, and he's right from an American perspective, that we should try to solve the Iranian problem, the nuclear problem, with negotiations and an agreement. And he's doing everything he can to make that happen. But he's not stupid. God forbid, President Trump is the opposite of that. He's very brilliant. And what he understands who the Iranians are and what they're capable of. He understands that the Iranians are very shrewd negotiators. He said it just the other day. They're very effective.
I saw it.
They were the ones who invented the game of chess, right? They invented the game of chess. In most countries, it's called shachmat or checkmate. Shach is the Iranian Persian word for king, and mat it means dead. Okay, so shachmat chess means death of the king. Okay, that's the game, and they are extraordinary players of chess. Okay, the Iranians. He understands that. He understands that they're trying to bide for time. The more time that they can waste on negotiations, the more time they have to improve their aerial defenses, their missile program, and their nuclear program. But on the other hand, America first means that Donald Trump is not going to put American soldiers, men and women, in harm's way in order to protect other countries, including Israel. Okay, and Israel doesn't expect America to put its troops in. Israel will defend herself with our own men and women, as we have been doing for 77 years. Okay, but one thing that could happen is something like this. I don't think if Israel decides that it needs to deal with the Iranian nuclear threat militarily, it will tell the United States that it's planning to. I believe they probably already have done so. And in a situation like that, I believe that given the fact that the Americans have tried in good faith to negotiate an agreement with Iran, that the Americans will certainly not interfere with an Israeli attempt to neutralize the Iranian nuclear threat.
Oh,
May even support it. May support it in a way. For example, if the Iranians, as they promised to do, launch a counterattack against Israel with their ballistic missiles, which they still hold. It's very possible the United States will do what they did in April and at the other time the Iranians attacked us and help us combat that ballistic missile threat. That's possible. And I believe that President Trump is capable of doing that, and I think he will do that. I mean, and under those circumstances. But now we can talk more about this, and time is running out. And I won't go into all the details of what an Israeli attack against Iran might look like. But Israel must do it. Okay, regardless of how Israel does it, Israel must do this to protect not only the 7 million Jews who live here, but the other 3 million non-Jews who live in Israel and even in the Palestinian Arab territories, Judea and Samaria and Gaza, because a nuclear strike against Israel will also affect them directly. So that is something that Israel must do to protect its population, Jewish and non-Jewish, and it must do it quickly before the time that we have to make an effective strike against Iranian nuclear facilities runs out.
Okay.
With that, Hannah, we're at 9:00 my time.
Okay.
And I have got to
Thank you
go.
so
I've got a
much.
busy
Yeah.
day ahead.
Thank you so much for your important morning hour, and I hope that you come back sometime to discuss other topics.
It would be an honor. And let me just thank you, Hannah, for inviting me onto your podcast.
It was
Let
my
me
pleasure.
also just
Yes.
let me also say a good day, and we say in Israel, "Besorot tovot." May we have good tidings. Okay,
Thank you.
both here in the land of Israel, in the Middle East, and in the wonderful nation of Japan, who
Thank you
we
so
have
much.
utmost admiration for and respect and love for.
Thank you
Have
so much.
a great week.
Okay, have a
Okay,
nice
thank you, Hannah.
day. Have a nice day.
Bye bye.
So today's guest was Marc Zell Esq, and you could find him on X as at GOP Israel. He posts various informational actually tweets that I find very, very interesting. He was talking about, for example, Eli Cohen, who was whose not exactly remains, but the notes and footages were recovered from Syria. Actually, he was talking about that, and I was quite interested in Eli Cohen, who was the spy who was sent to Syria, and what happened to him. It was very, very surprising, but you could follow him on X, and he is posting various opinions, and you could find him on social media that way. So I hope you have a nice afternoon, and well, I hope that people from Israel are listening to this podcast because, there are a lot of listeners from the United States and Japan. And obviously, I will be posting again in the evening. I'll be posting in the evening for American people, but I would like to just hope that Israeli people have a good morning and have a nice day.